It was to the north that Perrin had decided to make his fight. Fingering the ribbon hanging down one lapel, he peered in the direction of Watch Hill, the direction Thail had gone, and wondered why he had chosen the north side. Fly free, Thail. Fly free, my heart. He supposed it was as good a place to die as any. Gaul and Shead stood ready, heads wrapped in shufa and faces hidden to the eyes behind black veils. Side by side, Perrin noted. Whatever had passed between them, it seemed to outweigh their clan's blood feud. Loyal had a pair of wood axes, dwarfed in his huge hands, his tufted ears thrust forward fiercely, and his wide face was grim.
Isam!
The guttural roar rose like thunder, and Trollocs appeared, each half again as tall as a man and twice as wide, trotting into the fields to halt beyond bowshot, a hulking black-mailed mass, deep and stretching the length of the village. Thousands of them packed together, huge faces distorted by beaks and snouts, heads with horns or feathered crests, spikes at elbows and shoulders, scythe-curved swords and spiked axes, hooked spears and barbed tridents, a seemingly endless sea of cruel weapons. Behind them, Myrddraal galloped up and down on midnight horses, raven black cloaks hanging undisturbed as they whirled their mounts.
Isam!
And the black tide rolled forward, howling wordlessly. Thail was safe. Nothing else mattered. He would not let himself see the faces of the men stretched out to either side of him. He heard the same howls drifting from the south. Both sides at once. They had never tried that before. Thail was safe. At 400 paces! All along the ranks, bows rose together. Closer the howling mass came, long thick legs eating ground. Closer. Loose! The snap of bowstrings was lost in the Trolloc roar, but a goose-fletched hail streaked the sky as it arched out, plunging down into the dark-mailed horde. Stones from the catapults erupted in fiery balls and sharp splinters in those seething ranks. Trollocs fell. Perrin saw them go down, trampled beneath boots and hooves. Even some Myrddraal fell, yet the tidal wave rushed on, closing holes and gaps, apparently undiminished. There was no need to order another volley. A second followed the first as quickly as men could knock arrows. A second rain of broadhead points rising before the first dropped, the third following behind, the fourth, the fifth. Fire exploded among the Trollocs as fast as the catapult arms could be winched down, Verin galloping from catapult to lean down from her saddle. And the huge bellowing forms came on, crying in no language Perrin understood, but crying for blood, human blood and flesh. Men crouching behind the stakes readied themselves, hefting their weapons. Perrin felt cold inside. He could see the ground behind the Trolloc charge, already littered with their dead and dying, yet it hardly seemed there were fewer. Stepper pranced nervously, but he could not hear the Dun's wicker for the rolling howls of Trollocs. The axe came into his hand smoothly, long half-moon blade and thick spike catching the sunlight. Not midday yet. My heart is yours forever, Thail. This time, he did not think the stakes would hold. Not even slowing, the front rank of Trollocs ran onto the sharp stakes, faces contorted by snouts or beaks, twisting with pained shrieks, howling as they were impaled, driven down by more huge shapes scrambling up over their backs, some of those falling among the stakes, replaced by more. Always more. One last volley of arrows drove home at point-blank range, and then it was the spears and halberds and homemade polearms, thrusting and stabbing at towering forms in black mail, sometimes falling while the bowmen shot as best they could at the inhuman faces above their friends' heads. Boys shooting down from the rooftops, madness and death and ear-splitting roars and screams and howls. Slowly, inexorably, the Two Rivers line bulged inward at a dozen places, if it broke anywhere. "Fall back!" Perrin bellowed. A boar-snouted Trolloc, already bleeding, forced its way through the ranks of men, shrieking and striking with its thick curved sword. Perrin's axe split its head to the snout. Stepper was trying to rear, screaming silently in the din, "Fall back!" Darl Copland went down, clutching a thigh transfixed by a wrist-thick spear. Old Billy Conger tried to drag him backward while awkwardly wielding a boar spear. Harry Copland swung his halberd in defense of his brother, mouth wide in a seemingly soundless shout, "Fall back between the houses!" He was not sure whether others heard and passed the order, or the mountainous weight of Trolloc simply pressed in, but slowly, one grudging step at a time, the humans moved back. Loyal swung his bloodied axes like mallets, wide-mouthed snarling. Beside the Ogier, Bran thrust his spear grimly. He had lost his steel cap, and blood ran in his fringe of his grey hair. From his stallion, Thomas carved a space around Verin. Hair in wild disarray, she had lost her horse. Balls of fire streaked from her hands, and every Trolloc struck exploded in flames, as if soaked in oil. Not enough to hold. The two of his men edged back, jostling around Stepper. Gaul and she had fought back to back. She had only one spear left, and he slashed and stabbed with his heavy knife. Back. To the west and east, men had curved out from the defences there to keep the Trollocs from flanking them, pouring arrows in. Not enough. Back. Suddenly, a huge ram-horned shape was trying to pull Perrin out of the saddle, trying to climb up after him. Thrashing, Stepper went down under the combined weight. Leg pinned and pained near to breaking, Perrin struggled to bring his axe around, to fight hands bigger than any Ogier's away from his throat. The Trolloc screamed as Aram's sword sliced into its neck. Even as it collapsed atop Perrin, spraying bloods, the Tinker spun smoothly to run another Trolloc through the middle. Grunting with pain, Perrin kicked his way clear, aided by Stepper scrambling to his feet, but there was no time to think of remounting. He barely rolled aside as a black horse's hooves stamped where his head had been, pale, eyeless face snarling. The Fade leaned from its saddle as he tried to rise, dead black sword slashing, brushing his hair as he dropped. Ruthlessly he swung his axe, chopping one of the horse's legs out from under it. Horse and rider toppled together as they fell. He buried his axe where the halfman's eyes had been. He wrenched the blade free in time to see Daze Conger's pitchfork tines take a goat-snouted Trolloc in the throat. It seized the long shaft with one hand, stabbing a barbed spear at her with the other, but Mara Alvear calmly hamstrung it with one blow of her cleaver. The leg gave way, and she just as coolly severed the Trolloc's spine at the base of its neck. Another Trolloc lifted Bode Corfin into the air by her braid. Mouth wide in a terrified scream, she sank her wood axe into its mailed shoulder, just as her sister Eldarin thrust her boar spear through its chest, and grey-braided Nasa Aelin drove a thick butchering knife in as well. All up and down the line, as far as Perrin could see, the women were there. Their numbers were the only reason the line still held, almost driven back against the houses. Women among the men, shoulder to shoulder, some no more than girls, but then some of those men had never shaved. Some never would. Where are the White Cloaks? A boy, the same dark-haired runner who had come for him the night before, seized his arm as he turned to search for the companions. The companions had to try to cut a way out for the children. He would send them and do what he could here. "Lord Perrin!" the boy shouted at him. "Please listen! Master Alfor says someone's attacking the Trollocs, Lord Perrin!" Perrin was halfway to tell, hobbling on his bruised leg when it penetrated. He stuffed the axe half through his belt to hoist the boy up in front of his face by his shoulders. "Attacking them? Who?" "I don't know, Lord Perrin. Master Alvear said to tell you he thought he heard someone shouting Devon Rides." Aram grabbed Perrin's arm, wordlessly pointing with his bloody sword. Perrin turned in time to see a hail of arrows plunge into the Trollocs from the north. Another flight was already rising toward the top of its arc. "Go back to the other children," he said, setting the boy down. Seizing the reins Tell tossed him, he hauled himself up into the saddle and wondered if he was seeing what he wanted to see instead of what was really there. Beneath a red eagle banner at the edge of the fields, stood long rows of men in farmers' clothes, shooting their bows methodically, and beside the banner, Fail sat Swallow's saddle, Bane at her stirrup. It had to be Bane behind that black veil, and he could see Fail's face clearly. She looked excited, fearful, terrified and exuberant. She looked beautiful. Murderer were trying to turn some of the Trollocs around, trying to lead a charge against the Watch Hill men, but it was useless. Even Trollocs who did turn went down before they covered 50 strides. The Fade and its horse fell, not to arrows, but to panicked Trolloc hands and spears. It was the Trollocs moving back now, then running in a frenzy, fleeing shots from both sides. It was a slaughter. But Perrin hardly saw. Fail. He rode through, over a mound of dead Trollocs and never noticed. He had eyes for only one thing. Fail. She started out from the Watch Hill men, pausing to stop Bane from following, and rode to meet him. She rode so gracefully, as if the black mare were part of her, simply erect, guiding Swallow more with her knees than the reins held so casually in one hand. The red marriage ribbon still twined in her hair, the ends dangling past her shoulders. He must find her flowers. I said I would go, she said finally. I did not say how far. You could not say I did. I love you. It was all he could say. But strangely, it seemed to be enough.